Okay.
Just a word. Tomorrow's my birthday, 52.
Okay. Rocio's birthday, 52. Okay, good to hear that. Hi, gang. We're going to begin with a few prayers. We're taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. So while I'm reciting these, you can either recite, think of the meaning, or just try to develop that particular state of mind. So what we first want to do is to differentiate our mind stream from, say, agnosticism or other religious systems, to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then within that, of course, there's the Mahayana, Hinayana. We generate bodhicitta to differentiate from the Hinayana motivation of simply wanting to get out of samsara for ourself. And we'll offer short mandala to accumulate merit and purify negativity. Sangye churang soki chognam la, jangchu paru dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chunen gipe sognam ki, drola panchir sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I am enlightened. So that means Mahayana refuge. Generally, in the Hinayana, you don't take refuge until you're enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, Bodhisattvas, Arya Bodhisattvas, through the collections of merit and wisdom that I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, and adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, as well as the sun and the moon, visualized as a pure realm, as a Buddha realm, due to that, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of the vast or extensive Dharma. That means the Bodhisattva deeds and teachings dealing with conventional reality, and the profound Dharma. That means teachings that deal with the profound meaning of emptiness, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. I offer you, Guru, this precious mandala. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So, we're going to begin again, as we usually do, with a little bit of, meditation to, first of all, calm our mind, get rid of the thoughts that are in our mind, and set that motivation that we've enunciated with words a little more strongly. So sit comfortably. We're going to deal with this mindfulness of the breathing, which is one of the topics we're going to deal with today in the four placements of mindfulness, or the four close placements of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body. This is one of the limbs of that in some interpretation. So we're dealing with physicality here, that is the breathing. So you're going to watch and, first of all, recognize your breathing without controlling it. Recognize when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out, and even additional factors like in that teaching that we're going to be talking about today, You can recognize when there's a long breath. In other words, you don't purposely make it long, but you notice that it's long or short, that it's in or out, and so forth. Letting go of all other thoughts. Focusing your mindfulness on the respiration. I like to emphasize that during that period when the breath is changing direction, don't let your mind waver at that point. Might be a little period. Try to keep it in mind. Notice just exactly when it's changing direction, when it's in and out, whether it's long or short. And not paying attention to any aches or pains in your body or tension. They can naturally relax. As you don't pay attention to the stream of thoughts, they will naturally subside, or you could say relax. And when you're kind of focused on that, without other thoughts coming, sort of calming down the mind from the usual verbalization that goes on in your mind, let go of observing the breathing, turn your attention to your mental consciousness, which requires, first of all, observing the contents of your mind, because the mind is very subtle, clear light nature. If you've well practiced in this, you can have a remembering consciousness of that clear light nature, and just using that as a basis, sort of flow into that observation. The thoughts, images, plans, memories, emotions, and so forth are all like contents of your mind, like clouds in an otherwise clear sky, maybe some dark, forbidding clouds, worries or fears or pains. Maybe some vultures or hummingbirds flying through, nice sort of images or thoughts. Let go of them. Turn your attention away from the contents of the mind to try to surmise its nature as being unobstructing to the entry of thoughts and to their absorption back into the consciousness. In other words, they disappear. Where do they go? They didn't go out of eyesight, so to speak, or mind sight. They sort of dissolve back into the spaciousness of your mind, like a cloud on a sunny summer day evaporates. So as with the breathing, we were holding that with mindfulness. Now we're trying to hold our mindfulness on this conventional clear light nature of the mind, the fact that it is clear and knowing. The clarity is what's being emphasized here. Indirectly, you know that you're knowing, but you're trying to understand its clarity in the sense of it not having any viscosity, so to speak. It doesn't prevent thoughts from entering. It doesn't prevent them from leaving. This is our conventional nature of our mind. This is also called the conventional Buddha potential, conventional Buddha nature. The developmental Buddha nature means that we can develop our mind into the state of Buddhahood. There's nothing that prevents us, especially now observing at this moment as a human being with faith in the teachings, born in a religious country, not having intense obscurations due to bodily dysfunction or brain dysfunction, or not having committed the 5 acts of immediate retribution, having faith in the teachings, having the support of like-minded spiritual aspirants, a sangha, so to speak, having the karma to experience the largesse of the donors, patrons of the Dharma, like Shantideva Center, providing us a venue, communication with our spiritual friends. This auspicious moment, the Buddha called a life of leisure and endowment, comes so rarely over the course of numberless past lives, numberless potential future lives, depending on whether we practice or not, within cyclic existence. Most of the time, we don't have such an opportunity to recognize the Buddha potential within us, to recognize that we have this opportunity to practice the Dharma we're free to practice. We don't have to have first accumulated a lot of money. We don't have to have first reached a certain stature in life to be respected or be loved and so forth. We have everything we need now to practice the Dharma and to better ourselves, to become a real respectable person. I would say a mensch, so to speak, in Yiddish, real good person for ourselves and for others. We have that opportunity now. In fact, the Buddha taught that this auspicious moment, life of leisure and endowment, has the ability to accomplish a greater meaning than just some development for this life alone, because we will have future lives, regardless of whether we want to or not right now. Most likely, without practicing the Dharma, we'll take rebirth in the lower realms. Even if we practice half-heartedly, we might take rebirth in the lower realms, having left some imprint in our mind to meet the Dharma again in the future. But if we practice well, strongly, we can create the cause of another human lifetime in the future, another life of leisure and endowment, to continue the practice of Dharma, leading toward either liberation from cyclic existence, the lesser goal of nirvana that the Buddha taught in his lesser vehicle teachings, his Hinayana, as he called it, or seeing the potential of enlightenment, broadening our mind with empathy to look upon the plight of all living beings who have been our mothers numberless times in the past, have been depthlessly kind. Even the present irritant in your mind, the present enemy, has been your mother numberless times in the past, not with the same faults they have now. They protected us, they nourished us, they gave us our body, they taught us, they gave us enjoyments. All sentient beings. And going further, they are equal with us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free from suffering, so that we can identify with them in that equal sense as kind of ourselves. We can impute upon the entirety of living beings the same aspirations that we have now, wanting to be happy and wanting to be free of suffering. So we can feel compassion when others suffer. We can feel joy when they feel happiness, without jealousy or envy, without disinterest. To bring about their goal, their possibility of achieving liberation or enlightenment, we ourselves have to develop those realizations ourselves. We have to have renunciation. We have to have compassion, love. We need deep understanding of the meaning of emptiness, the ultimate nature of phenomena. To be able to help sentient beings, so to repay their kindness, even when they've been enemies, we need to become enlightened. And in order to become enlightened, to become a Buddha, perfect in all ways, we have to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom. The main cooperative conditions, the main causes, you can say, of achieving the Buddha's form bodies and mental body. In order to that, we need to know how to practice, how to accumulate merit, how to purify negativity, how to meditate on emptiness. To do that, we have the opportunity today to listen to the teachings commented on, explained by Lama Tsongkhapa, explaining Chandrakirti's brilliant Madhyamaka Avatara, entry into the middle way, explaining Nagarjuna's deep thought, understanding Buddha's intention in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. I think I'm going to listen, contemplate, and when something becomes clear, an understanding that I've analyzed becomes clear, I'm going to meditate on it. I'm going to hold that thought in mind for some time today while listening to the teachings in order to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Within enlightenment, I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings wherever they are successively, perhaps over many, many lifetimes, out of the hell realms, out of the preta realms, out of the animal realms, into higher realms, perhaps as humans, to hear the teachings, to practice, and themselves become enlightened. I'm going to listen to the teachings today in order to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. That motivation is like an inertia that will pervade all of our activity during this class, making it virtuous, even when our mind wanders. So relax your body, relax your mind, come back to the present. Good to see you. Hi, those who came since we started. Richard and Katie, Jennifer, William, Paul, Sheila, Anna, Sunny. Hi to all of you. So we have maybe some questions or comments before we start. Anyone have some Dharma itch that needs scratching? Any questions about what we've been talking about? We've been following in Lama Tsongkhapa's Gompa Rabsel, means the illumination of the intention, which is his commentary to Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, root verses, the Karakas, and his own auto commentary, and which are meaning commentary, Chandrakirti's meaning commentary of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. He also wrote a word commentary called the Prasanapada, or the clearly worded, or as some of you said, not so clearly worded when you've read some of his commentary, because when you need commentary even to that. So that's what we've been talking about. We're just about to begin the fourth Bodhisattva Bhumi, From having achieved the path of seeing, realized emptiness directly, the bodhisattva has passed through the first ground, first bhumi, the second bhumi, the third bhumi, where he or she had a special practice of patience, we've been talking about. We just finished that chapter, that mind generation, it's called. So when it uses the word mind generation, or as Jimpa said, say, for instance, the last sentence of the third bhumi, it says, this concludes the exposition of the third ground of the ultimate awakening mind. It's it's not ultimate bodhicitta, it actually says ultimate mind generation, which is a synonym of bodhicitta. So that's why I guess he says ultimate awakening mind. So we just finished that, and we're going to begin now the fourth ground. Okay. So how are we doing? Anyone have a question? Everything up to date? Okay. So we are on, and I neglected to mention this at the end of the last class, we're on page 147 in Jimpa's hardbound edition. We're on page 223 in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, which is found in the book Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism, if you happen to have that. The fourth ground, the radiant, everyone seems to choose that as the translation of the Tibetan and Sanskrit, the fourth ground. So the text says, the fourth ground, the radiant, this has three parts. So in Tibetan style, usually giving outlines. In Sanskrit, it wasn't in the treatises, in the Shastras, there weren't so many outlines given. Usually there was some kind of discussion about what came before and what's coming next, sort of like a connection, without giving so detailed, this kind of analysis of outlines and so forth. But maybe it worked for the Tibetans and works for us, I think. Fourth ground, the radiant. This has three parts, three outlines, showing that diligence, as Jimpa's translating here, you can say effort, virya, or enthusiastic perseverance, different ways of translating the same term. They're not different Sanskrit or Tibetan words. They're just different translations of the same word trying to get it. So sometimes perseverance or diligence or effort makes sense. Sometimes people add the word, what do they call it? Joyous effort, because when you get down to the definition of what this effort means, it doesn't mean general effort. It means taking joy in practicing the Dharma, in creating virtue, taking joy in virtue. Like say, the mouse has got the mouse has gotten caught by the cat, as the cat or the bird, and it's still alive. The mouse or the bird is still alive, and you even though you have to get off your seat and run around, catch the cat, and gently take the mouse or bird out of its mouth and protect it, even though that takes a lot of effort, you take joy in that, as opposed to the effort you might take in making money, starting a startup, all the effort that you have to do in doing these other things, they're generally not under the category of diligence or effort. So sometimes we add the word joyous effort. Okay, so anyway, showing that joyous effort or virya is superior on this ground. That we talked about this special practice Each of the grounds has one of the perfections that it's especially adept with at that point. So in this ground, it's effort, still practicing generosity, still practicing morality, and in the future, also practicing concentration and wisdom and prayer and so forth, but especially on this ground, special practice, superior practice, or surpassing practice of effort. Then the second outline, the etymology of the name. Why is it called the radiant? Having radiance. And third outline, showing what is particularly relinquished, or as Jeffrey translates, the features of abandonment on this ground. What things are abandoned. Okay, so first outline, showing that diligence is superior on this ground. So the Lama Tsongkhapa's text says, on this ground, more than the first three perfections, it is diligence that comes to be superior. So Jeffrey translates that as, now Chandrakirti, he adds the word Chandrakirti. The text doesn't say Chandrakirti, but it says, now Chandrakirti indicates that on the fourth ground, effort surpasses the first three perfections and is lower than the remaining six. Jimpa doesn't say that in his, maybe that's coming later. So the first verse of the fourth chapter, the first karaka, says, all higher qualities follow after diligence, follow as a result of effort, right? It is the cause of merit and wisdom, that is effort, virya, joyous effort, perseverance. It is the cause of the two collections, where diligence, where effort becomes to be set ablaze, that ground is the fourth. So Jeffrey's translation, more or less the same. All attainments follow after effort. It is the cause of the two collections of merit and wisdom. The ground where effort flames or blazes is the fourth, the radiant. Okay. So I remember in university, I lived in a house with a bunch of other guys, all pretty brilliant. Some of them didn't work so hard, got good grades. Some people didn't work so hard and got low grades, depend on their brilliance, their native intelligence. But some people worked really hard, not necessarily, they weren't necessarily the most brilliant, but they got very good grades, and they learned a lot and they profited as a result of their effort. So that's the meaning here. All higher qualities follow after diligence. All attainments follow after effort. What do we say in what was it in the war that when the oil was being disputed in Iraq and so forth? We said the mother of all wars, right? Remember that? So sometimes effort is called the mother of all achievements. When we talk about developing single-pointed concentration, we talk about all of the achievements depend upon using effort, using diligence and so forth, doing it again and again, and going into depth and so forth. So very, very important. So the text, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, paraphrasing Chandrakirti's auto commentary. Generally, as you know, Gompa Rapsal is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, but it's very much paraphrasing Chandrakirti's auto commentary, and sometimes paraphrasing Jayananda's commentary to Chandrakirti. Jayananda was the only Indian pundit that wrote a commentary to Madhyamaka Vatara, besides Chandrakirti himself, right? So it comes up oftentimes. So the text says, no higher qualities come about for someone who does not take joy in virtue. Okay, taking joy in virtue. Gewa la topa. Topa means kind of like, also can mean elaborations, but topa here means sort of being joyous, like getting excited about something. One who does not delight in virtue does not engage in all the various forms of giving and so forth. Jeffrey translates. Because there is, or as Jimpa says, because there is no engagement at all, without taking joy in virtue, there's no engagement at all in generosity and so on. Or like morality, like say, taking joy in getting up and saving the mouse, or taking joy in generosity. Generosity, a lot of people, given their druthers, they will not engage in generosity. Do you know what that means, Nadine? Giving their druthers? Rocio, you don't know. Who can explain that English expression? Doris, what is giving their druthers?
Given a choice.
Given a choice, yeah. Given a choice, they won't necessarily engage in generosity, but someone who has taken that to mind, who has joyous effort, who's taking joy in virtue. Remember, I mentioned at the beginning, that's kind of like the defining characteristic of this perfection, virya or sundru, taking joy in virtue, taking joy in being virtuous. In contrast, for those who derive joy from having gathered or in gathering the qualities like generosity mentioned above, the qualities that he or she has already attained will be enhanced, and those not yet attained will be achieved. So, worldly example, like my friend in our house, I remember his name was also George Eldis, who was Greek American. He used to, at those days, you could smoke indoors. In our room, he used to smoke all the time and drink coffee continuously, up very, very late studying and so forth. And so, the qualities that he had already attained would be enhanced. So due to his study, his understanding and his adeptness in mathematics and science and so forth were enhanced, as well as achieving the qualities that he had not yet achieved. So that, so here, when we're talking about the bodhisattva, not just talking about worldly, where we can see there's a very good example, you will enhance what you have already achieved, by practicing with joyous effort. And that joyous effort will propel you to achieve qualities that you have not achieved before. So all of you who've taken effort to come to these classes for many, many weeks, maybe almost coming on a year now, or maybe it's already a year, you have achieved, you've enhanced qualities that you had before because of your effort, by listening and thinking and studying and so forth. And you probably have achieved some qualities that you didn't have before. So that's the essence here. Therefore, all higher qualities, without exception, follow after diligence. So it's like the mother, like it actually says in the teachings on tranquil abiding, that all of the higher qualities depend upon effort. And so it's like the mother, right? And it is the cause of the two collections of merit and wisdom, or in other words, gnosis, yeshe gitsok. The ground where such diligence comes to be especially set ablaze, that ground is the fourth, the radiant. So maybe etymologically we'll see why it's called radiant, but that already gives a hint. You know, you're setting this diligence ablaze. Since on the third ground, the bodhisattva attained higher training in concentration, far more excellent than that on the first two grounds. From this, he had achieved unique pliancy that permanently dispelled laziness. Well, let's see. Since on the third ground, the bodhisattva has attained higher training in concentration, far more excellent than that on the first two grounds. From this, he has achieved a unique pliancy that permanently dispels laziness. Does that make sense? I thought here effort was going to dispel the laziness. Jeffrey translates that as, on the third ground, a training in higher meditative stabilization is attained. We could say was attained because we're talking about the fourth bhumi, that greatly exceeds that of the first two grounds. Remember when we talked about the third ground? Third ground is a special practice of patience, but as a subsidiary, the bodhisattva had a special extra quality of concentration that he didn't have on the first two grounds. And one of the experiences of concentration, when you develop single-pointed concentration, you develop a physical and mental pliancy. Do you remember these terms? David, do you remember physical and mental pliancy? Yeah. So I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when we would be at Laudo, near Mount Everest, and you have to walk from Laudo to the airport in, where was it? In Lukla, I guess it was. It's a several-day walk, or it could be less. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would walk so fast, as though, even though he didn't exercise, he didn't run, or anything like this, because of the physical pliancy of having achieved concentration. Even in Tibet, the certain kind of meditation called Gomba, where you could, almost like in a trance, you could walk for days at a time once you've achieved that kind of pliancy, physical pliancy. And mental pliancy means the mind is able to, not get tired. After a couple of hours of studying and preparing for class or something, my mind becomes tired and I have to take a break. But if you have pliancy, you can keep on going. So the statement was, Jeffrey translates, on the third ground, we're on the fourth ground, but it's talking about the third ground, a training in higher meditative stabilization is attained that greatly exceeds that of the first two grounds. On the fourth ground, the ground that we are on now, a bodhisattva thereby attains a pliancy generated from meditative stabilization. So as a result of having achieved that special concentration on the third ground, now a special pliancy, and that's considered to be the antidote of laziness. When we talk about you remember when we talk about the 9 stages of developing shamatha? One of the first faults that has to be eliminated is laziness, right? You have to develop effort. And laziness is not completely dispelled until you develop on the 9th level physical and mental pliancy, which dispels the faulty airs within your body that prevent, physical pliancy, and dispels the faulty airs that prevent mental pliancy. So here on the fourth ground, where does it say? The radiance. Since on the third ground, the bodhisattva has attained higher training in concentration, far more excellent than that on the first two grounds. From this, he or she has achieved a unique pliancy here on this fourth ground that permanently dispels laziness. So on this ground, the perfection of diligence comes to be superior. Make sense? Jennifer, are you okay? Making sense? Okay. So next comes, what was that? That was the outline called showing that diligence is superior on this ground. Why is it superior? Because on the third ground, there was a special concentration that led to the beginning of pliancy. Now on this ground, that's enhanced and dispels laziness and so forth. So now the etymology of the name of the ground, or description of the ground. Here, the next first three lines of the second stanza of the fourth bhumi here. Here the Sugata's children come to have, through their special practice of the factors of enlightenment, the light of gnosis far brighter than the glow of shining copper. Any idea why it mentioned shining copper, Stephen?
Yeah, Venerable George, that's one of the special qualities of the third ground.
Yeah,
the appearance that comes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there was a copper glow, right? So now there's even a greater, a brighter light of gnosis, greater than that on the third ground. So why is it called radiant? One might ask. Someone would say, why is it called radiant? Here on this fourth ground, the Sugata's children. Why does it call it Sugata? What are the Sugata's children? Is Sugata some lady, or what is that? Sounds like a lady's name, like Snehi or something, right? Jennifer, who are the Sugata's children?
The bodhisattvas, the children of the ones gone to bliss.
Right. So Sugata is another synonym, another epithet of the Buddhas. The Buddha's children or offspring is a name given to the bodhisattvas because they will, like their proverbial father here, they will become Buddhas eventually. So here on the fourth ground, the Sugata's children, the bodhisattvas, come to have, through their special practice of the 37 factors of enlightenment, Jeffrey translates the 37 practices harmonious with perfect enlightenment. They will come to have come to a level of they will come to have, through their special practice of the 37 factors of enlightenment, to a level far superior compared to before, a light of gnosis similar to, but far brighter than the glow of shining copper mentioned in the context of the third ground, just as Stephen had said. So the 37 factors of enlightenment, or the 37 harmonies with perfect enlightenment. So we call this kind of term, the 37 practices, is one of the main practices in the Hinayana tradition. Here, also the Mahayana, but in Hinayana, they don't talk so much about the bodhisattva perfections because they're not aiming to become bodhisattvas. They're not aiming to become Buddhas. They're aiming to achieve nirvana, to become arhats. And I think I mentioned to you on a couple of occasions before when I was in Sri Lanka and at a Theravada monastery in what's the main city?
Colombo?
Colombo, I think. Yeah, Colombo. On a lake, near a lake, there was a monastery that very kindly put me up without question, even though I had different kind of robes. And the head monk, when we would, generally the monks wouldn't hang out with the abbot, but because I was a guest and we would talk, he knew enough English to talk. I didn't know any of his language, but he said, everything, it's only thing that's important are the 37 practices, the 37. And as we'll see, we're going to be going into detail about this over some sessions. It includes, many, many things that are essential, especially to achieve nirvana, but especially for the bodhisattva also. There are different implication for the bodhisattva. So we're talking about these bodhipaksha. Have you heard that term before? KT, have you heard that term, the Sanskrit term, bodhipaksha?
No, I haven't heard that term.
Okay.
I haven't heard that one.
So bodhi means enlightenment. Paksha
Okay.
can mean direction. It can also mean wing. So sometimes people translate it to 37 wings of bodhi, the 37 wings of enlightenment. Have you anyone heard that expression sometime? 37 wings? Sometimes people have translated that. There's some discussion by the early authors that investigated Buddhism and translated it into English. What was the correct term? Could be both. Anyway, here, because this light of fire of perfect gnosis comes to be far superior on this ground, this bodhisattva ground is called the radiant. So it's called the radiant because this glow has become greater than the third ground. What was the third ground called? Do you remember the English name? Mikhail, do you remember what the third ground is called?
Arya.
The luminous.
Someone whispered luminous. I don't know if they snuck in there. Okay, so if something is luminous, that sounds like, it's like a lamp is luminous, but if it's radiant, that sounds more, right? So it's an enhancement from that, because the glow of shining copper mentioned in the context of the third ground has been exceeded here. Because the light of fire of perfect gnosis comes to be far superior on this ground, this bodhisattva ground is called the radiant. These very features are stated below in the precious garland, the text by Nagarjuna, Rinchen Tengwa, Ratnavali in Sanskrit. So this is quoted in the Madhyamaka Vatara. Chandrakirti's description in his supplement, the Madhyamaka Vatara, is similar to Nagarjuna's explanation in the Precious Garland. So if you have a translation of the Precious Garland, this is verses 447 and 448. So that the verses start, the fourth, meaning the fourth ground, is called the radiant. For the light, or because the light of perfect gnosis has arisen, or because the light of true wisdom has arisen. So this yangdak, what do we say? Yangdak yeshe. So yangdak sometimes means perfect. Sometimes it can be called what did Jeffrey say here? True wisdom. Yangdak means, correct or true wisdom has arisen. For he has cultivated especially all the factors of enlightenment. As a fruitional effect of this, so when we talk about fruitional effect, that means when you create karma, if you create a path of action, path of karma, it has 4 effects, one of which is called the maturation or the fruitional effect, right? And generally, what are the fruitional effects generally, Nadine? Or the maturation effects?
This is the throwing karma.
Yeah, it creates the karma. The result, one of the results of karma is rebirth in another realm. In other words, the fruitional effect means the effect that you will experience being thrown into another realm. So as a fruitional effect of this, that bodhisattva will be a king of conflict-free Yama gods. Or as Jeffrey says, they will become a king of the gods in the land without combat, or conflict-free. I'm not sure why Jimpa adds Yama there. Anyway, so there are various realms in the desire realm, in the God realm, and one of them is called the land without combat, or as Jimpa says, conflict-free gods. So that would be nice here now, right? On Earth. We had something like that. What was it? Historically, someone listening to this maybe years later, this is when the rebel in Russia, the mercenaries are vowing to go to Moscow and overcome the bureaucrats there. There's conflict there. There's conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There's conflict between the Democrats and the Republicans, between the rich and the poor, and so forth and so on. So it'd be nice to be in a conflict-free zone. As a fruitional effect of this, he will be king of conflict-free gods. He will be skilled in utterly destroying the identity view and its derivatives, or as we often translate, the view of the transitory collection. Jeffrey says he is skilled in quelling the arising of the view that is the transitory collection, thinking that it is a real self. Let me see here. So, Jigsoklatawa Rabjungwa Kune Jomne Kebayan. So I don't see where Jimpa gets and its derivatives. Let's see, his note 272 says Nagarjuna. He just quotes, that's the place. So I'm not sure where he gets the idea of derivatives. So the text continues now. So that's just quoting, Lama Tsongkhapa is quoting Ratnavali in order to verify the stanza that Chandrakirti had written. Okay, it's the same thing. Nagarjuna is saying the same thing. The 37 factors of enlightenment refer to the 7 sets, such as the 4 establishings of mindfulness. So what's this saying? The 37 bodhipaksha are, you could say there are seven sets in that. There's the 4 placements of mindfulness, or as some people are translating now, establishings of mindfulness, close placements of mindfulness. Does anyone know that the Pali or Sanskrit of that? Richard, are you familiar with the scriptures?
I've read the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. I've read, Bhikkhu Analayo's book on that, but I can't say that I know the Sanskrit.
Okay, who or the Pali? Paul, what's the Pali? You know the Pali, right?
Or the Pali.
It's Upadisha, Upasthana, something like that.
Satipatthana.
Satipatthana, that's it. Yeah.
Satipatthana. Generally, that's what people say. The Satipatthana Sutra or Sutta, because in the Theravada canon, there's a Satipatthana Sutra. There's a Mahasatipatthana Sutra. Sati is the Pali word for mindfulness. In Sanskrit, it's smriti, right? When those of you who studied mind and mental factors, you may remember we talked about it a little bit in that context, because the mental factor called mindfulness is called smriti. Generally in Pali, when you're talking about the difference between Sanskrit and Pali, they're essentially the same, almost exactly the same, except certain words, and say a Sanskrit word like smriti has a conjunction of differing consonants, like smriti. How would you spell that in sort of what do you call it? Transliteration. Diana, what do you think? How would you write smriti in Roman characters?
I have trouble spelling just in English.
Me too.
So,
What would you think?
yeah, SMRITI.
Yeah, something like this. SM. So there's two consonants are not the same consonant. You don't have in Pali, you don't find in general two differing consonants adjacent to one another. So the smear, the R sound is actually the vowel R. There's when you see transliteration of Sanskrit, sometimes you see an R with a dot underneath it. That's actually a vowel in Sanskrit. Sounds like R. You don't have to put an I after it. Sometimes people will write SMRITI, smear, because that R sound already has the sound of ri, like rishi, like maharishi. That's that vowel R sound. So smriti, that becomes sati in Pali. So the satipatthana is the establishing of mindfulness, sati, patthana, or it's the actually in Pali also sometimes you see sati upatthana, but in Sanskrit the upa comes also in smriti upasthana, and that means the upa is translated sometimes as closely. It's like closely mindfulness. What do I say? Smriti upasthana, close placement of mindfulness. The close kind of means placing the mindfulness very directly, closely on something. That extra syllable in there. Whereas in the Pali Sutras, they don't often have the upa in that. So they call the Satipatthana Sutras, the Mahasatipatthana Sutras. So in the coming classes, we'll have a break next week, but in the coming classes, we'll make reference to those sutras. So here, what are the 7 sets? The first set is the 4 Satipatthanas or Smriti Upasthanas, which are establishing or closely placing mindfulness on the body, the feelings, the mind, and dharmas. Jeffrey says mindfulness establishment on phenomena, dharma. What is Jimpa says? Mental objects. So what does that mean? Why is it dharmas? Dharma generally includes all phenomena are called dharmas, right? But in particular, those phenomena that are solely objects of the mental consciousness are called the what do we call them? The mental entrances and the mental dhatus. Remember, there are 12 entrances and there are 18 dhatus. So when you talk about that which gives rise to mental consciousness, those phenomena that are exclusive to the mind, that you can't see with the eye, you can't hear with the ear, you can't smell, taste, or touch, those things are called dharmas, mental dharmas. Okay, so maybe that's why why Jimpa says here. So the 4 establishings of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthanas, or the 4 smriti upasthanas, are the 4 that are placing the mindfulness on the body, the feelings, the mind, and mental objects. So the body, that includes many, many things. So generally, and there's some debate among even the Pali scholars about this. Nowadays, it seems to include many things. Like, for instance, if you had gone to a retreat with Goenka, early days, or if you went with, who's the Vietnamese teacher who just died a couple of years ago?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Minto, did you study with him?
I did go to a retreat with him in Blue Cliff Monastery in New York City.
Oh, in New York. Okay, I thought you might have been in Vietnam with him.
Yeah.
So Thich Nhat Hanh, he gave a retreat at Instituto Lama Khapa one time, and a couple of the Sangha came. Most of the nuns came, the Italian nuns. None of the other Italian monks came. I was the only Western monk that came. So he gave me a little time. So I had a discussion with him in his room. Generally, he didn't have time to meet with people individually. That was quite interesting. I'll tell you that story another time. So, but generally, in between, you would sit in, you would do mindfulness of the breathing, which is the body, and in between classes, you would do walking meditation. You've all seen this, very popular in so-called satipatthana courses or meditation courses or something, walking meditation. You'd be mindful, your foot is going up, it's going down, and this and that. There would be eating meditation, it's physical also, so on the body, the spoon is coming, the fork is coming, so forth. What's another one that they would do? Do you know? Generally.
They do a lot of walking meditation. They do a lot of mindfulness. I think that is actually the basic level. But then I also saw that he actually talked a lot about emptiness sometimes too. For the
I'm just talking about the mindfulness of the body, close placement of mindfulness on the body. So that included breathing, also mindful of your posture, mindful when you're out of the meditation session, when you're walking, when you're sitting, when you're
eating. It actually very
lying down. Yeah, just eating. We talked about a minute ago. What are the 4 postures? So there's standing, walking, lying. Which one am I missing?
Standing, walking, like sitting.
Sitting.
Sitting. Okay. Standing, walking, sitting, lying. Right. So you're mindful of those 4 postures, and then when you're eating, as Minto was saying, you're mindful of that. So those generally are called close placement of mindfulness on the body, but originally in what some scholars think are the sort of more older suttas, it was mainly mindfulness of the body, meant mindful of its impurities. So you would analyze the 32 impure substances within the body, right? As though with your mind's eye, the scalpel of your mind, you would open up the body and investigate the flesh, the fat below that, the blood, the mucus, the liver, the spleen, the lungs, all of these 32. We'll talk about some of that later. But that was on an earlier level, that was considered to be the main thing. In fact, it's called a Kayagata Smriti. Has anyone heard that before? Kayagata Smriti. Paul, have you heard that? So that's one of the famous suttas, and mainly just talking about the impurities of the body. So gata means what? Does anyone know?
Gata usually means going, or
gata means gone, right?
Gone, yeah.
Like okay. So why in the Prajnaparamita we say, and the mantra of great wisdom, the mantra of this and that, gate para samgate bodhi svaha. Why is it gate and this is gata? Anyone know? Ask your cat, Paul.
Yes, so gata is the past passive participle, that which has gone, or that
Right.
which goes, and gate would be the passive present form. Is can't even put it in the passive. Yeah, something like that.
It may be, but especially in explaining it, sometimes it's called the vocative. So we're saying gone, like we say eat, is gone beyond,
Right.
gone completely beyond, bodhi, so be it, gate para samgati bodhi. So gata is the past participle of gam, which is the Sanskrit word to go.
Right.
And interesting, I've mentioned this in other classes, almost in all languages, some of the most fundamental words are completely irregular in the different tenses. So like in, it's when we say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Buddhanam saranam gachami. Here it's gata. You don't have any M and so forth. In English, we say go, gone. In Tibetan, we say droa and chinba, having gone and so forth. So anyway, mindfulness that has gone to the body. That's the Kaya Gata Smriti or Sati. That's one of the Hinayana scriptures that mainly just talks about the impurities of the body. That's you're mindful of the impurities of the body. Okay, so there's 7 sets of these. So there's the 4 satipathanas, or the 4 smriti upasthanas, the 4 perfect endeavors. Okay, so this is what is this usually called in when it's translated into Tibetan? Does anyone know? Mikhail?
Abandoning?
Yeah, so sometimes in Tibetan they have it as pongbashi, the 4 what is it, yandakpa or whatever, abandonings. So that might lead to some confusion. Why is it called the 4 perfect endeavors? So the in Tibetan it's called the yangdakpa pongbashi. Pongpa usually means abandoning. So the word in Sanskrit, there are two words that you find in the Pali canon with just one letter difference. One is pradhana and one is prahana. Prahana sounds more like abandoning. Pradhana means more like endeavoring. So it has both meanings, because this is the famous one, as you see here, generating virtuous factors that have not yet arisen. Remember the prayer that we do often during the dedications. Jangchub Semcho Rinpoche, Ma ke panam ke gyurchik. So may the precious bodhicitta that has not arisen, may it arise. So that's like this first one, generating virtuous factors that have not yet arisen. So that takes certain amount of effort, right? Here it says the four perfect endeavors. That sort of works for the first two. Then second one, increasing those that have already arisen. What do we say? Jangchub Semcho Rinpoche, Ma ke panam ke gyurchik. May the bodhicitta that has not arisen, may it arise, and may that which has arisen not decrease, but increase evermore, right? You know the verse I'm talking about? Sheila, you know this verse? Do you say it in Tibetan, Sheila, or do you always say it in English? So usually when you're in the teachings with Tibetan lamas, you always say it in Tibetan. Jangchub Semcho Rinpoche Ma ke panam ke gyurchik Kepa nyampa mepa dang, may that which has arisen not decrease. Gong, what was it? Gone gomba pelwasho, may increase evermore. So that's like this second one, increasing those which have already arisen. Okay, so that's kind of like the meaning of perfect endeavor. Then the next two, not generating non-virtuous factors that have not yet arisen, and perfectly relinquishing, or let's say abandoning, those which have already arisen. So Jeffrey translates it as the four thorough abandonings. He's taking the Tibetan translation. Generating virtuous qualities not yet generated, increasing virtuous qualities that were already generated, not generating non-virtuous qualities not yet generated, and thoroughly abandoning non-virtuous qualities already generated. So you prevent the creation of negative karmas, you're mindful of that, and you work to abandon those that you already have. We all have probably we all have all the non-virtues now, but we may not be I'm not so angry. I'm more of an attached person or something like this, or I'm more jealous and I don't have that kind of fault. We have all those faults, but we may have some that are more predominant. So it says not generating non-virtuous things that are not yet generated. That means even you think you're not angry, you make sure to avoid those things, and thoroughly abandoning the non-virtuous qualities already, or non-virtuous faults already generated. So if you have anger, if you have attachment, miserliness, low self-esteem, loneliness, all of the different things that can cause us to be unhappy, abandoning them. So it has both meanings. So in some of the Pali authors translated as the four endeavors and abandonings, because it has both meanings. Some people translate it just one. Here, Jimpa translates it as the four perfect endeavors. Okay, makes sense so far? Anna, you following? Okay. William? Yeah? Okay, just, okay, no one wants to say. Okay, so then next one, the four limbs of supernatural feats. It's not it's not FEETS, which should be just without the S, FEATS, right? So anyone know the Indian word for that? Snehi, do you know what those are called?
Just so happened I was looking at my computer and it says Riddhi.
Riddhi.
Pada, otherwise I wouldn't know.
Right. So that, let's see, do I have it down here? How does it say, how is Riddhi spelled?
It's RIDDHI, and it's also the name of one of the wives of Lord Ganesha.
There you go. Okay. So I think the Riddhi, that R is also this R with a dot underneath. So you wouldn't find an I after that, right? Is that right, Paul? I think that's
Yeah. Riddhi.
It's just you would find RDDHI with a dot under the I, so that's the vowel R. Even though when it's transliterated into English, people will put the I after the R, because we don't have a vowel R in English. Do we? Do we have a vowel R in English? Well, we have some semi-vowels, like what is it? A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, right? You remember when you learned the vowels in grade school? So Y is sometimes called a semi-vowel because it can act also as a consonant, like yes or no or something like that. But Sanskrit has these other ones that are vowels. So these are the four limbs of Riddhi, or the Riddhipada. Jeffrey translates the four legs of manifestation. Limbs or legs. So when we talk about verses, the different verses, the different lines of a verse are called pada. There are also in the praise that some of you who do the succession yoga know, when you do the praises of the 8 pada to Vajrayogini and the praises of the 8 pada to Heruka. Those, they just, you say lines, the 8 lines or 8-line praise, or here Jeffrey translates the 4 legs of manifestation instead of saying supernatural feats. So what are they? They are the mental factor aspiration, the mental factor diligence or effort. That's what we're talking about here. The Jimpa translates mind. Jeffrey translates the third one thought. And the fourth one is analysis in the form of concentration. Jeffrey says analytical meditation stabilization. Okay, so what does this mean? In order to develop, there are different kinds of explanations of this. And again, when we go, now we're just sort of drawing the outline, so to get to know these terms and to know them in general. Later, in our next class, we'll go over some of the meaning of this, other meanings. But generally, in order to have supernatural feats, supernatural powers, or the ability to manifest and so forth, that means magical manifestation, you have to, as preparation for that, you have to especially have these 4 mental factors, or 4 mental activities perfected in order to be able to do that. okay, in order to make magical manifestations and so forth. So Jimpa says the 4 limbs of supernatural feats: aspiration, diligence, mind. Jeffrey says thought, and analysis in the form of concentration, or Jeffrey says analytical meditation, stabilization. That's the word concentration. So it's kind of like analysis within that concentration. Mikhail.
Yeah, thank you. Just what is this third one, thought or mind? Is it mental factor?
Yes. So I don't have. I didn't put down the Tibetan here. I didn't check that. So it doesn't mean mind in general. It means a particular kind of conceptual activity. Say, for instance, in order to make manifestations. So again, we'll go into more detail when we fill in the detail. We're just drawing the outline, like when an artist draws a face. Then you fill in the details later. Okay, so we've got 3 limbs so far, right? 3 of these 7 sets. The 4 bodhipaksha, the 4 4 satipatthanas, the 4 perfect endeavors, or the 4 thorough abandonings, and now the 4 legs of magical manifestation or supernatural feats, whatever. Okay. Now the next, so there's 3. Now the next one, the next 2 are called the 5 faculties and the 5 powers. It's 2 separate sets. So generally, faculties, so the indriya in Tibetan, what are the indriya generally? The 5, the faculties. Does anyone know? Jennifer, do you know what when we usually talk about the faculties?
Is that the 5 sense powers?
Yeah, sometimes we talk about the 5 faculties, the eye faculty or eye sense power, because indriya kind of has a sense of indra being powerful, indriya, ear sense power, nose sense power, taste sense power, body sense power. Those are called indriya, those are called faculties. Also mental faculty, but that's not physical. But in general, there are other faculties in the Abhidharma. You talk about other faculties also, and they include these 5: faith, effort, or Jimpa says diligence, mindfulness, concentration, or as Jeffrey translates, meditative stabilization. That means samadhi and wisdom. Sometimes concentration means dhyana. Here it means samadhi. So these are 5 faculties. Like when we say the bodhisattvas of sharp faculties. Remember when we talk about that? Who are the bodhisattvas of sharp faculties? What method do they use to develop bodhicitta? Not resonating with anyone?
They realize wisdom first and then develop bodhicitta.
Yeah, because they are of sharp, their faculty of wisdom is particularly sharp. So that's the 5th one. But also they have great faith, diligence, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Those who are dull in those qualities, especially wisdom, aren't adept to develop bodhicitta through equalizing and exchanging self and others so much. They usually use the method of the 7 elements of cause and effect, remembering that all sentient beings have been your mother and so forth and so on, right? So that's the same meaning of faculties in that context. When we talk about sharp faculties, it usually means these faculties, especially wisdom, okay? So then the 5 powers are the same list of 5 things, except it in a greater degree. I think, I can't remember right now, we'll have in our, when we fill in the details, I think on the path of seeing and above, before that they're called faculties, and then when they become conjoined with wisdom of emptiness, they're called the 5 powers. Okay, so what do we have? We have the 4 placements of mindfulness, the 4 abandonings or perfect endeavors, the 4 limbs of magical emanation or supernatural feats, the 5 faculties, and the 5 powers. Okay, so some of them are duplicated, right? Some of you find the same names, like faith and so forth, comes several times, and wisdom comes, and concentration comes, and so forth. So in some of the texts in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, Ornament of Mahayana Sutras, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, there it's mentioned this very qualm, in terms of entities, there are certain ones that are the same, and I can't remember how many, if you just count how many that are actually different. So there's not, so we said the 37 factors, right? Some of them are redundant. So among those, there might be, in the end, there might be just 17 or something like that. I can't remember off the head. So we finished, we've got 2 more sets to go. One of them is the 7 limbs of enlightenment, or the 7 branches of enlightenment, right? So this is very, very famous also. Sometimes, there's a Satipatthana Sutra, just talking about the Satipatthanas. And there are other sutras that, or other teachings about one of these other sets. These 7 limbs also are considered sometimes as a separate topic. So here, Chimpa has them as mindfulness. We saw mindfulness before also, right? Clear discrimination of the character of phenomena. What does he call it? Discrimination. Right, same Jeffrey has. Diligence or effort. Joy. What is this joy? Does anyone know what this one is? Is Paul still here? Let's see. There it is. Do you know what this joy is? Well,
I don't remember.
This is Gawa in Tibetan, but in Sanskrit we say priti, not like Pretty, Priti, pretty. So pretty sometimes is translated as zest or some other kinds of words like that. Pliancy. Remember when we talked about mental and physical pliancy? Where did we talk about that? Right. I said in order to have supernatural feats like being able to walk, some of the, to walk, have physical, overcome the physical detriments of the body, you needed to have pliancy. So here, pliancy, concentration, and equanimity. So different lists, right? Mindfulness, clear discrimination of the character of phenomena, diligence or effort, joy, pliancy, concentration, and equanimity. Here it doesn't mention wisdom, right? So we'll talk about why those are considered important as a separate set, these 7 sets that make up the 37 Bodhipaksha. And then the last one, the famous Eightfold Arya Path, right? The Eightfold Path. sometimes in describing the Dharma chakra, sometimes it has 8 spokes that correspond to these 8 Arya, what do we call them? Eightfold path, Arya path. So sometimes when people talk about the Four Noble Truths, we talk about the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, second truth. Third truth is the truth of cessation. And what's the fourth truth? Karen, do you know the fourth noble truth? That's one, yeah. But what is it? What is the fourth noble truth? You don't know?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. It's the path to the cessation of the suffering.
Right. It's called the truth of the path. So in the Theravada tradition, generally they say the truth of the path is the eightfold Arya path. Mahayana doesn't say that. It says the truth of the path is meditative equipoise on emptiness. That's the path that leads to cessation in the liberated path, right? You have, when you're a meditative, uninterrupted path, a meditative of equipoise on emptiness, that means that you are actually abandoning them. That's the path that leads to cessation of the delusions. So here, sometimes even Mahayana people, having familiar with the Theravada teaching that the truth of the path is the eightfold Arya path. Sometimes the Mahayana writers say that, but that's generally not the Mahayana position. It's just one of those things. So what are these eightfold? What is the eightfold Arya path? So, right view, right? Let's see what it was, yeah, or correct view. Usually, I think are you familiar with that term, right view or correct view? Maybe right view sounds like you've read translations before using right? It's the same yang dakpa, sort of correct or right view. Correct or right intention. Okay, this is a little bit debatable because Jeffrey says correct realization. But that, I think Jeffrey's translation on page 225 at the end there, the end of that, Don, is Don still here? Did Don disappear? I thought Don was here before. Okay. In Jeffrey's translation, generally Jeffrey's pretty correct in most of these, but he has correct realization. This is yang dakpa tokpa, but the way that this tokpa is spelled is the meaning of conception or thought, and some people translate it as intention. It's not the spelling of tokpa with a suffix at the end that means realization. So I think Jeffrey's translation is wrong there. It's right view, right intention, right speech, right action. Actually, that's not correct. What Jimpa has there is not correct. It should be as Hopkins has, the correct aim of actions or end of actions. Correct or right livelihood, correct effort or diligence, correct mindfulness, and correct concentration. Okay, so what is this talking about? This is from the Mahayana point of view. These are only this Eightfold Arya path only takes place, one only has these on the path of seeing and above, on the first bhumi and above. It almost sounds like these are just, it sounds like in the Theravada teachings, it's like the general path you have to practice to get, to nirvana, like the truth of the path or something like that. But these only take place when you, for instance, to have right view and right intention, these only are taking place on the path of seeing, on the first bhumi and above. So some of them you're familiar with, probably. When people talk about right view, that means the right view of selflessness in the Theravada tradition, or in Mahayana means the right view of emptiness. When we talk about right speech, what does that usually encompass? Do any of you know? Goodbye, Rocio. I see you put a message up. She's already gone. What does right speech mean? Nadine, do you know? Have you heard?
To who?
Not lying.
To who?
Siri, shut up.
I won't send it.
Thank you. Goodbye. That was on my iPad, it triggered something there. So not lying, but it also means, what else? Not being abusive, not having, views that separate other, what do we call it?
Divisive?
Divisive speech, and not idle gossip, right? So that's something you may be familiar when we talk about right speech. Right action means the right end of action that will need some detail later when we talk about that later in detail when you fill in some things, what that means, the difference between action and end of action. Right livelihood, you've probably heard. KT, have you heard what right livelihood is? Generally in the teachings, what are right livelihoods? You can't unmute. There you go.
Sorry, I'm on my son's laptop and I can't control it.
You can control your son and you can control his laptop. Okay.
Both of them. Right livelihood. I've heard it described as like being in a livelihood that doesn't harm others. For example, killing animals or things like this, to not be involved in that kind of a livelihood that causes you to steal or things like that.
Right. So for instance,
harmful.
Right. So the first approximation means things like not being a butcher. Nowadays, butchers in the grocery stores don't have to kill the animals, but butcher in the ancient world meant someone who, killed the animal and then sliced it up, right? So that's considered wrong livelihood, being a thief, trying to make your money that way and so forth, or generally, like say, working in the bomb making industry. Weapon manufacturer, fossil fuel. What did Minto say here? How do I get this up there? Minto just put a chat up. I can't see all of the things. Wrong livelihood. Okay. Oh, I know. I'm trying to put my finger on the screen of my laptop, but it doesn't work that way. Weapon manufacturer, fossil fuel industry, and so forth. Yeah, those are considered wrong livelihoods. If you work for a company and your job is to cheat on the taxes, like Trump's controller of his company in New York City, right? Supposedly writing the false things, attributing the value of his of his stuff. That's considered wrong livelihood, but that's only some of them. Other kinds of wrong livelihood are things like hinting, like say, for instance, oh, I could really use a new computer. I could really use, if someone were to bring me butter, I could, if you're in a hermitage or something like that, sort of hinting to someone who might be predisposed to give rather than just asking for it. That's considered wrong livelihood. Also, and we'll talk about the details again later, like the famous Geshe, I can't remember his name. So anyway, he heard that some patrons were coming to his little hermitage. I have my properties, I have named Dharma Hermitage, that Sean very kindly is making a wooden plaque with a laser carver or something like this. So it looks very nice. He sent me pictures. So in his hermitage, he heard that a patron was coming. So his place was usually a mess, like my place is usually a mess. But when he heard the patron was coming, he said, oh my gosh. So he cleaned off the dust from his altar, put water in the bowls, which were usually empty, put everything around. And then he realized the 8 worldly dharmas, that he was thinking only to impress this person in order to get some kind of offering from the person, thinking that he was a good practitioner. So he threw the dirt back on his altar, took the water out, messed it up again. And it's said that some of the lamas that had clairvoyance, from a distance, they said, oh, Geshe, who was it? You remember the name? Remember the name from the Lanrim teachings? Nadine, do you know the name?
Geshe Ben Gupya.
Ben Gungyal, right? Ben Gungyal. So Geshe Ben Gungyal, thank you. You can always count on Nadine to know these obscure facts. Some lamas who had clairvoyance, they said, "Oh, Geshe Ben Gungyal has just practiced pure dharma," because they realized that he'd gone out of his way to overcome his attachment to the 8 worldly dharmas, wanting to get respect from the patron, maybe receive offerings and so forth. So he was that was considered to be a very pure dharma, holy dharma practice. So that's considered also, what do we call it? Wrong livelihood. So there are other categories besides working in the arms industry or being a butcher or a thief or something like this, that are considered wrong livelihoods. So what do we have here? Right view, right intention or thought, right speech, we talked about right actions, right livelihood, right diligence or right effort, or what Jeffrey says, right exertion, right mindfulness, and right meditative stabilization or right concentration. So those are the elements that are called the Eightfold Noble Path. So if you go through that list, there are 37 things. Some of them are redundant. Sometimes they appear 3 times, or I can't remember, maybe more. If you take those out, there are a lesser number, but still these 7 sets are far famed. Okay, well famed. Okay, so now the first ground is the basis for training. So that means the first bodhisattva ground, right? Lapango la nipar lakpar sultimdang. Lapangoa. What am I saying here? Now, the first ground is the basis of training. So Jeffrey has a little bit funny. He says the first group is the basis of training. It actually says, in Tibetan, it actually says and I don't have, oh yeah, Sadir, Jangshok Sodun Rakbadang. No, I can't remember. Anyway, in the Tibetan, it does say this ground. Jeffrey
Satangbo.
Satangbo, right? So Jeffrey translates the first group as though the 7 groups, the first one is the basis of training. That's not right. Jippa has it right here. The first ground is the basis of training. And these 37 practices. As far as the actual training goes, the higher training in morality, well, let's say, when it says training, when we talk about the 3 higher trainings, what are the 3 higher trainings? Does anyone know? Who can I ask? William, do you know the 3 higher trainings? The 3 higher trainings?
I defer to Nadine.
Again?
I say I defer to Nadine.
Nadine knows. I'm not gonna.
Ethic, concentration, and wisdom.
Yeah, morality, concentration, and wisdom. So what does that mean? Those are the trainings. They correspond to the 3 kinds of scriptures. So, for instance, the Vinaya or Vinaya, the basket of the Buddhist teachings about discipline are the basis for the higher training of morality. The Sutra Pitaka, even though the sutras have so many different topics in them, it said that that's the main source for the training in concentration, higher training of concentration. And the Abhidharma Pitaka, which in the Mahayana Abhidharma would include the Prajnaparamitas and so forth, is the basis, the scriptural basis for the higher training in wisdom. So usually there are 3 higher trainings. Why are they called higher trainings? Anyone know? Anna, do you know why they're called higher trainings and not just trainings?
Venerable, I'm wondering if it has something to do with, by working on this is what leads to liberation.
Yeah. What differentiates? Diana, do you remember? We might have talked in some of the courses before.
I'm not remembering right now.
So generally, if the training, like say, for instance, before you enter the path, you can practice morality, you can practice concentration, you can practice wisdom, but it's not called a higher training in those. You can even call them trainings, but when you're conjoined with at least renunciation of cyclic existence, they're called higher trainings. Because on the basis of having renunciation, you've entered the path, and so your training then is a higher training because it can actually lead to liberation. The higher training of morality, higher training of concentration, higher training of wisdom. So these these various practices that we're just talking about here can be set into these 3 kinds of training. So it says the first ground is the basis for training. That means for the training in the 3 higher trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. As far as the actual training goes, the higher training in morality, because the first ground is what? The special practice of generosity. That's not considered one of the 3 higher trainings, right? As far as the actual training goes, the higher training in morality relates to the second ground, or how was another way of saying there? In terms of the entities of the trainings, the second ground is the higher training in ethics or morality. The third ground, where are we saying? As far as the actual training goes, the higher training in morality correlates to the second ground. The higher training in the mind or concentration correlates to the third ground. right? It's not talking about generally when we talk about the different grounds, we say where's the ground where you have the perfection of dhyana, which is sometimes translated concentration. It's the fifth ground, right? It's a generosity, first ground, morality, patience, effort or enthusiastic perseverance, where we're down at fourth, concentration or dhyana, and then wisdom on the sixth ground, right? So you would think that the higher training in concentration would be on the fifth ground, but here it says the third ground, while the higher training in wisdom correlates to the fourth, fifth, and sixth grounds. Okay, so because on this ground there is a special understanding of wisdom higher than other grounds. So here on this ground, the bodhisattva becomes especially endowed with the training in wisdom that is highly versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the 37 factors of enlightenment, right? You might say, oh, this ground is the ground of effort, but the wisdom that is here blooming especially is on the understanding of the coarse and subtle aspects of the 37 factors of enlightenment. On the fourth ground, a bodhisattva has a training in wisdom and becomes very skilled in the coarse and subtle 37 harmonies with enlightenment, Jeffrey translates. Okay. Making sense so far? Okay. David, you're enjoying the breeze out there? Where did Karen go? Is she Karen? Oh, Karen's here. Yeah. You're just on different sides of the porch, right? Okay. Okay. Doris, is making sense so far? Anything that's sort of like completely unclear? It's kind of like Rachel Maddow. I watch oftentimes. Now she's on just one day a week. She'll after she gives her explanation, she gets the expert on it, and she says, "Did I get anything wrong?" So, here I'm asking you. I may have gotten something wrong, but here I'm asking you: is there anything you don't understand at all? Okay. So now, okay, we might be able to do our first sweep. Although we may finish reading this now, the next class, which will be in 2 weeks, we'll go into more detail of this, right? So the next outline says, showing what is particularly relinquished, or the features of abandonment. So this, the fourth line of the second stanza of the fourth bhumi says, thoughts associated with the identity view totally ceased. Or Jeffrey says, what is related to the view of a self is extinguished. The word thoughts does not appear into that. It says, Rangdu Tawa Dang Dewa Yongsuze, completely extinguished. You completely extinguish what is related with the view toward this wrong. This is not the usual word for self, wrong. So here on this ground, thoughts that are associated with the identity view, namely, so when he says the identity view, you remember what that means. It means a view of the transitory collection, right? Thoughts that are associated with the identity view, namely the subtle identity view, and thoughts that precede it, such as grasping at coarse levels of I and mine, in terms of holding on to a self, in terms of holding on to a sentient being, and so on, as substantially existent, as well as grasping at the existence of phenomena in terms of clinging to the aggregates, elements, faculties, sense bases, and so on, is truly existent, these will totally cease. The meaning of the word cessation here is that the bodhisattva eliminates those seeds of the twofold self-grasping that are the specific objects of abandonment to be relinquished on this ground. Jeffrey says the meaning of extinguishment, or he says cessation, is an abandonment of the seeds of the two conceptions of self, that are to be abandoned on this ground. So when Jimpa says those seeds of the twofold self-grasping, that sounds like, usually when you talk about self-grasping means the grasping to the self of a person, but it means the two kinds of grasping to self and to phenomena. It is not the case that the entirety of self-grasping is annihilated, is exhausted. The meaning of extinguishment is that an abandonment of the seeds of the two conceptions of self that are to be abandoned on this ground, but not extinguishment of all forms of the two conceptions, because it is not the case that the entirety of self-grasping is annihilated. The sutra, that means the sutra on the 10 grounds, also indicates the presence of innate identity view within the minds of bodhisattvas on the 4th ground, because we know that the innate view of the transitory collection is not totally ceased until the 8th ground, right? Until that first minute, the end of the 7th ground, depending on how you want to divide it, the end of the 7th ground, the beginning of the 8th ground, one still has innate grasping to the self of your own personal identity. Okay, so listen to this. You don't hear this very often. This concludes exposition of the 4th ground of the ultimate awakening mind from Gompa Rapso, Illuminating the Intent, an exposition of entering the middle way. Wow. So actually, we're going to go over this chapter again in our next class in 2 weeks. We have next week off, remember, and we'll fill in details because there's a lot of meaty details. And I will offer some readings from the William. I'll get to you in a second. Readings from the Theravada Suttas. So Snehi's just put a note up of the dates of the next group of teachings. What was I going to say? Okay, yeah, William, what do you have? What do you think?
This is back to something I do know a little bit about. This is for Nadine. In English, we would say, I would rather. In other words, I would rather have this. Or you can make that short and say, I would rather have something. If I had my druthers, meaning if I had what I would rather have, that's what that means. Wenn ich gerne haben könnte, was ich möchte, von allen Möglichkeiten, my druthers. So I would rather have.
Thank you, William.
Thank you.
That's good. So the D of would, you leave off the W-O-U-L and you just say D.
I'd rather.
Druther. Yeah, you put D.
I'd rather wait till tomorrow to answer that question.
I would rather. Yeah, I would rather write it.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
if I had my druthers, meaning if I had what I would rather have, wenn ich haben könnte von allen Möglichkeiten, was ich gerne haben möchte, that means my druthers, what I would like to have.
Thank you.
Was ich gerne haben, wenn ich alle Möglichkeiten hätte.
Okay. So anyone besides Nadine speaks German here? I mean, William obviously does. Okay. So that's anyways useful. Maybe someone who listens on the web later will find that also useful besides Nadine. Thank you, William. Very kind. So we're going to stop there. Snehi, you have another question. You have a
Yes, please. I'm a little confused, and that whole discussion about the first ground being the basis of training, and then the second, third, the second being morality. Why is this? Why are they taking the grounds now and putting them in the context of the three higher trainings?
Because generally the grounds are divided that way. We say the first ground. Sometimes the first ground is put also in something else, but generally, when you talk about the three higher trainings in the Hinayana tradition, the Theravada, that's the main division of your practice. Your training in higher morality, higher concentration, higher wisdom. Morality acts as a basis for being able to concentrate, because you don't have minds, you've calmed the bad thoughts and so forth. That's one of the bases. Lama Yeshe used to say, a lot of people want to develop single-pointed concentration, but they don't know the secret ingredient. The secret ingredient is ethics, morality. If you have pure morality, that acts as the basis for being able to be successful in the higher training in concentration. And if you have higher the success in the higher training of concentration, then when you develop wisdom, it's not like you just see it for a short time and then it's gone. You can concentrate on it. So that acts as the higher training in concentration acts as the basis for the higher training in wisdom, which brings about the goal of ceasing the delusions in the bodhisattva path. Also, finally, along with bodhicitta, eliminating the obstructions to omniscience. So generally, you can see morality is on the second ground, because that's the special surpassing feature there. And then concentration here, surprisingly, is not the fourth ground. It's the what did it say? The third ground? Third ground. And then the fourth, fifth, and sixth are the higher training of wisdom. Sometimes we say that the practice of ethics includes all of them. As I said, the practice of ethics, the practice of effort, what do you say, pervades all of them. Okay. So any last question? How are we doing? William, you have a question?
I just wanted to comment. I believe it said the first three bhumis were suitable to be taught to lay people. So in some way, that emphasis would make it lower rather than higher. And then with the fourth bhumi, with the concentration, the light of the joyous effort of the fourth bhumi goes not only forward to meditation and wisdom, but backward over the bhumis previous to it, so that the concentration you would have on the third bhumi, second, and even first bhumi would be enlightened backward and forward through the development of the joyous effort on the fourth bhumi. I think that was it. At least I understood that.
So when it said what is suitable for a lay, meant lay bodhisattvas, it said that particularly the practices of generosity, morality, and patience that was especially suitable for them. But that didn't mean that the ordained bodhisattvas shouldn't practice those also. In terms of generosity, the ordained bodhisattva's main act of generosity is the practice of giving the dharma, generosity of dharma, and the generosity of fearlessness. Also, the lay people can do that. They can buy a goat that is about to be slaughtered or something like that and protect them that way. But the bodhisattva is giving advice. The ordained bodhisattvas are called on to give advice, and so they can give fearlessness that way also. So it's not so much talking about the bhumis, it's talking about the practices. It's not like the first three bhumis are suitable for the laity. If you go back and read, it's the practices of generosity, morality, and patience are especially, lauded for the lay bodhisattvas. And you could say for the laity in general, right? They don't have as much time in general to develop concentration and wisdom and so forth. Okay, good questions. Doris.
Thank you, Venerable. Could you repeat what you announced before class about the Tantra sessions for those that weren't here at that time?
Right. I should have said earlier when a couple of people had to leave. So if anyone is interested in these in the next 2 weeks, when we don't have this class, I'll try to give some basic talks on Tantra, the tantric vows, and the 6-session yoga for those of you who've received a highest yoga tantra initiation, such as the Kala Chakra or the Krishnacharya Haruka Chakra Samvara that His Holiness gave already been a month or so ago. So some of you may not have any kind of practice you can do. So the 6-session yoga is something that's very suitable. I'll try to explain once we talk about the tantric vows, especially the 19 samayas of the 5 Buddha families. Then I'll talk about the middling, sometimes called the short 6-session yoga, not the 1-verse 6-session yoga, but it's not as long as the long 6-session yoga. So if you're interested, if you can contact Doris, and we'll, if you have qualification and you're interested to attend, we can set a date. And someone said, Karen said we could use her. Was it Karen who said we could use your Zoom, so we won't be constrained to 45 minutes. We can do like an hour or something like that.
If there's a conflict with Shantideva.
If there's conflict with Shantideva, right. Otherwise, you use Shantideva. Okay, so Snehi still here? Snehi, could you put up the dedication prayers? So at the end, we created virtuous karma at the beginning. In the middle, while we were doing the practice, we tried to keep concentration and mindfulness. Now at the end, I think there's some, either above or below that, there's an actual dedication prayer, right? There we go. Okay. And at the end, we want to dedicate first conventionally, so that the virtues that were created, when they ripen, are not exhausted in that one event, but by persevering, by aiming them toward full enlightenment, they will not be exhausted until that time, but they could still be destroyed by anger, so that we'll follow the conventional dedication with the dedication within the emptiness of the 3 spheres. So think, due to the virtues, Gewadi, there's no word merits of these virtuous actions here. It's actually Gewadi, means due to these virtues, may I quickly achieve the state of a Guru Buddha. May I quickly become a Guru Buddha. You might wonder why Guru Buddha? Why not just Buddha? Because the sense here is that, as a Buddha who is able, like a guru, to give teachings and so forth in the form of a worldly teacher and so forth, and thereby lead all migrators without exception, each and every migrator, even our enemies, into that enlightened state. And then the verse that we had alluded to when we talked about the four endeavors, perfect endeavors, or four perfect abandonments. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then we can go here. So the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and quickly seeing his smiling face again. Peerless teacher and assembly of the bodhisattvas, the children of the victorious ones, you Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas with your psychic powers who can hear me now. The conqueror Losang Drakpa, meaning Lama Tsongkhapa, victorious Losang, who is the spiritual father to his two spiritual sons, Gyaltsab and Kedrup, along with the lineage masters, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, giving when we talk about the realization, the scriptural realization and the realizational realization, a dharma, explanation falls under the agama and the scriptural, and practice falls under the realizational dharma. You, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience, sopa, that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the conqueror's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefits and happiness emerge, as I mentioned before, it mentions in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, many places, all benefit and happiness of sentient beings depends on the dharma, on the teachings and so forth, so that they're very, very precious. And while striving single-pointedly for the sake of mother's sentient beings, you suddenly, unexpectedly departed to peace, which has been a great loss for us. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the offspring of the conquerors, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So although that's a prayer, we can use it here as a dedication, thinking, due to these merits, may these wishes be accomplished. How can that happen? The virtuous karma that we created can become the cause of our overcoming in our own minds the discordant factors that might prevent the reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, disrespect for the gurus, abandoning the dharma, and so forth. So to purify the merits that we created, and then seal the dedications that we've made to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, to develop the precious bodhicitta and so forth, and for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Seal this dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres. One way of understanding that is that the merits that we created, we recognize now, although you can't point them out anywhere. We have a mental image of them, but they are not inherently existent. They are just imputed upon the actions that we've created that will bring about happiness in the future, virtuous karma. The goals dedicated to our achievement of enlightenment, the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our development of bodhicitta and renunciation and right view and so forth. All of those are cognizable. We might have mental thoughts about them, mental images of them, but they are not inherently existent. They're just merely imputed, designated to those states, conventional states. And the act of dedication, joining that we wish to join these merits so that they ripen in those ways, that process can't be found anywhere. You can't, if you look at the process, you can't say this is dedication. That's just a name attributed to that wish, strong aspiration that the karmic seeds ripen in these ways. They're all empty. All three of these spheres are empty of inherent existence. Dedicating in that way helps to prevent the meritorious karma from being destroyed by anger, wrong view, criticizing bodhisattvas, abandoning the Dharma, and so forth, as we've explained earlier. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you next time. So next time, we're going to start at the same place. We're going to start at the beginning of this fourth chapter fourth Bhumi that we started today. We finished, but we're going to fill in details. So just so that you know that that's Jimpa page 147, Hopkins page 223. That's again where we'll start next time. So Doris, do you have last thought?
Just wondering, are we doing discussion on Monday?
Hopefully, if that's okay. Was that work for you? Some people may have interest to come. Okay, so we won't hold out Monday as one of the days for the possible tantric discussion of Tantra. Okay, so look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Monday, and maybe next week in the Tantra, and in 2 weeks with this class. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable
Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable
Meeting ahead.
Venerable George.